How do you get people to think about the fact that marketing is about communication, it's about education?
Marketing, the success is down to three things. There's the numbers. All the numbers have to line up. There's the creative side. All the art has to line up. But there's a third thing in the mix, and that is...
Today on the pod, we'll be talking to Ryan Shinn. He's Western Group Marketing Director for CentiMark. While Ryan is a B2B marketer, his experience in retail and B2C really shines through in the things he's doing there at CentiMark. So we'll talk about some exciting things today, talking about the importance of prioritizing the human connection when it comes to high consideration sales, whether that be B2B or B2C. We'll talk about the fact that maintaining that high touch is important and technology can play a role in making sure that happens. And we'll talk about the importance of making sure the customer feels acknowledged, they feel heard, and they feel known, and how that can ultimately drive sales. We're really excited to be talking to Ryan today. Let's get started. Ryan, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. We're happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited about this.
I know that you have spent a lot of time in both sides of the marketing world, both direct-to-consumer, B2C side, as well as now your current role, really focusing more on B2B marketing. And even though our podcast and our listeners really focus on that business-to-consumer side, we're excited to talk to you because there's so many parallels. And you're in a unique position to be able to speak to those parallels because of having kind of walked on both sides of that wall. So when we think about that, I guess my first question to you really is, what have you seen? What lessons have you learned from your retail side, your retail experience that have really translated over to the B2B world?
I would say that, first of all, like a lot of the lessons from the B2C world are equivalent to the B2B world. A lot of it comes down to communication. In the B2C world, people want that connection. They want to be heard. They want to be responded to. They want to be valued. That lesson completely carries over to the B2B world. I often train new people coming in and say, if you go into a store, a small store, and the clerk is busy, but he recognizes you and he says, I'll be with you just as soon as I can. You'll wait a while. And maybe 15 minutes, and you don't feel slighted. If you decide to leave, it's only in your mind because that person is too busy and you'll come back. But flip the script and you go in and he doesn't recognize you at all and just keeps his eyes locked on his current customer and kind of ignores you. From your point of view, you might leave after 10 minutes and you're mad just because you feel like you weren't valued and you weren't communicated with at all. And the only difference is a little tiny interaction that he had, recognizing that you were there, right? And it's the same way in the B2B world. Just you don't have to be in front of the customer the second they have a need. Just let them know that you know that they're there. From a marketing standpoint, from a sales standpoint too. Both are valuable.
That makes complete sense. And it's funny, a lot of the acknowledgement that you have to give in the B2B world, which again translates directly to B2C, is from a lead perspective, right? So you have the obviously e-commerce world where people are actually purchasing, making the actual transaction online. But there's plenty that happens on the B2C side where that's not happening. In real estate, where perhaps you're just making an appointment to connect with a leasing agent or a real estate agent for a purchase offline. In healthcare, where perhaps you're requesting and setting up an appointment with a healthcare professional, right? There's all these different industries where you're just making the initial contact. And because that's the case, there is that need for reciprocity to say, okay, I've reached out to you. When are you going to reach back out to me and acknowledge that I've contacted you? Is that something that you see has a powerful impact, that acknowledgement on how people kind of continue through the process and end up actually making that end purchase?
Oh, absolutely. So in a world that's so AI driven, so technology driven, it comes across often as sterile. And those tools can really help us to communicate. I recently had a situation with my refrigerator. That's my kitchen back there. The refrigerator's in the kitchen. And it was under warranty, but it had an issue. And so I had to have a technician from the manufacturer come out. And interestingly enough, and this is very different from the usual experience with someone in the trades, for instance. Um, they had a text system that let me know in the beginning of the morning what time the technician was estimated to be out. And then regularly it would text me like your technician is coming to you next, so estimated at 10 o'clock, let's say. The technician is on the way. The technician is 5 minutes away. And I appreciate it. And obviously that was driven by technology. And I appreciated that because it kept me informed. But that doesn't replace the personal interaction that you have between marketing, between sales. And sometimes that makes all the difference in the world. Like if you call up customer service and you get the automated line, press 3 for this, then that wears you out as a consumer quickly, even in the B2B world. But if, like, for instance, one of the great things about calling American Express is you pretty instantly get a person on the line who then helps you. So from the marketing standpoint, the marketing to sales handoff, if somebody is quick to respond and just let you know that they're there, that they value you. And from there, you go into some sort of technology driven queue that's okay. Like you've had that personal interaction.
Again, that importance for that human aspect of it, as you mentioned, is something that just can't be lost. And arguably, it matters certainly more in certain industries than it does in others, but I think it matters across the board, right? But we gave the example of real estate, of healthcare, where you really need that human touch, right? That human interaction because of just the emotional risk, right, involved in it. Or perhaps even in real estate, where there's a bit of an emotional risk too, because of the large amount of investment. Maybe if you're buying a home, your first home, right? Why do you think people mess up communication so much in the customer experience? Why do you think that so easily gets lost in the shuffle of a good and positive customer experience nowadays?
It's because of two things. Number one, in any organization, sales guys, be it once again B2B or B2C, are under big goals, right? And so in their minds, they don't have a lot of time to chase those interactions when there's low hanging fruit in front of them, directly in front of them. I often uh, have a metaphor in my mind from that. There was an old Disney cartoon of a bear who's looking for a fish, and a tiny fish jumps and he catches it, and he's he's not happy about the prospect of eating this little tiny fish. But as it dangles above the water, a bigger fish comes in and eats it, and then a bigger fish, and then he figures it out, and he's using it as bait, right? And suddenly there's a giant fish there, and he's licking his lips when a little tiny fish jumps over here, and he lets that go to grab the other fish, and he's back to square one, right? So um, that is often in their minds of the sales guy. He wants the low hanging fruit, the big fish, right? And what I suggest is you can do both, right? All it takes is a call to that little fish customer, and that might turn into a big thing, but it doesn't have to take you off your game. And number two, everything is moving so quickly. Um, and so oftentimes a sales guy, if he's gone a month and this is languishing, it's slowly falling off the table, as I like to say, then he's going to feel bad to go after that, because he then has to say, "I'm sorry, it's been a month and you've been waiting, but I do value you," right? And it's just easier to get rid of that or to send it back to marketing and say it's not qualified or the customer isn't responding to me. And let's be honest, like sometimes the customer isn't responding to you, but sometimes as a sales guy, you just haven't made the call. And and from technology that can help you on that to somebody on your team who can kind of queue up and set schedules. There are tools that you can use that will keep that from happening. And oftentimes people aren't thinking about that when they're going so quickly.
As you know, on the show, we talk a lot about the post-click experience, right? So great, you've gotten someone to click on the ad, the advertising has worked, wonderful. Now what happens next? And it's in that experience where marketing kind of takes that handoff and says, okay, how do I get this person to become a lead, right? And to get them into that process so that they can get in contact with that salesperson, that leasing agent, the doctor's office, whatever the case may be. Um, what do you think it's important for marketers to keep in mind in that post-click experience, not only just to get people to become a lead or to set an appointment, but also to kind of help prep and warm that lead for the salesperson, for the leasing agent, for the cases? What kinds of things are important in that process from an educational standpoint, from an emotional standpoint, that can really help kind of grease the wheel, so to speak, to get that person moving through the process?
In the 1970s, IBM came up with this BANT qualification that they created. It's a acronym, right? Um, and oftentimes, let's say there's a click, and let's say there's even an online form that's filled out that is saying that the customer is interested or they need a quote, right? So the but the customer themselves isn't going to go through to see if their BANT qualified, right? Budget authority needs timeline. There's also a fit. I add to that. I say BANT to my people, but that they're not going to know that. But somebody in marketing is going to know that, and really, it's hard to do that all technology driven. Um, now this is going to be different from like an e-commerce thing where they're buying a widget, right? So you'll sell a widget to whoever wants to buy a widget. And it's up to them then to ask the question, okay, do I need this widget? Do I need it now? Am I the guy to buy this widget? That's all customer qualified. But on something that's more capital intensive, something that's a bigger process, something that's requires meetings internally, right? Um, the marketing team is going to have to figure out where along the line that customer is. Maybe they do have a need, but it's not until next year, or maybe they just need numbers so they can build the budget for next year. Or maybe there's somebody else in the process that the company needs to talk to. So that part, it's really very hard to have that technology driven because it sounds robotic. It sounds like sometimes like a telemarketer, you can hear the pages of the script turning, and that's not the conversation that often a customer wants to have. So you need to be quick to respond, number one. But you need to find out an organic way to ask those conversations. Maybe you don't go through the BANTF on the phone, but that needs to be answered, whether in person, on the phone, over email, however. But be quick to respond because that's going to fall off the table quickly. Um, and get those qualifying questions answered because then you can do the marketing sales handoff.
It's funny, you talked about your experience with your refrigerator. I'm thinking about my experience now. We're kind of halfway in the market for a new car kind of thing. You probably experienced this where you're kind of thinking about it, but you're not sure what you want or what you don't want. And it makes me think about how nonlinear that process is, right? And how important it is to get as often as you can those key pieces of information from the consumer, because there are so many different levels involved in making a decision, right? So you're getting a car, now you're talking about a $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 decision that I'm making. You're talking about something where myself and my wife have to, obviously be in sync about what we want and what we don't want. But I think about going there, talking to the salesperson, getting the test drive. My wife wasn't with me, going back with my wife, getting the test drive. In the interim, going on the website, researching information about the different models. He mentioned some things. He was very informative. There's some things I forgot, kind of went back and looked at the website again and said, oh yeah, that's the difference between this model and so forth. And I think about that dance back and forth between technology and person, right? So the need for those things to be in lockstep, to be in sync, right? And the fact that it is such a non-linear process in terms of going through that. How do you find you train your teams to maintain that level of touch, that level of communication, because it is such a high consideration purchase that you're dealing with on the B2B side? And even the example for me on the B2C side, right? Still high consideration, still high touch, still a lot of questions, other people to get involved in the process. How do you train your teams to make sure they're maintaining that level of communication?
In the B2B world, you're going to have things that somewhat recently I bought some foam for a case for some technology, right? I didn't need to go through a process or a, a series of meetings and stuff for that capital expenditure. I just did it, right? That was B2B. But then there's other times where so my company deals with roofing, right? Sometimes $10,000, sometimes multiple millions of dollars, big capex processes, right? And so the marketing team needs to oftentimes there's a series of conversations, and I don't like the whole it's happened to me loads of times every week. The salesperson asks, "Oh, can I call back this week?" Well, no, don't bother me, right? Um, but have that be customer driven when that needs to be followed up with. And don't be so hungry. You seem like a teenage boy at a junior high dance. Um, so so just when it makes sense. And I remember years ago listening to one of my marketers talking to a customer, and he was he spent 10 minutes talking about his old football team back in college, and I was getting very exasperated until the last 2 minutes of the interaction. He said, "Mr. Customer, I know you talked with me 6 months ago about waiting for some numbers on your roof. Does it make sense for us to come out and give you that bed?" And the customer said, "Yeah, absolutely." And he said, "Okay, great. I'll have him come out. He'll give you a call next week." Right? Bam, it was done. Right? So there had been, as you mentioned, multiple follow-ups, non-linear, with the car dealer, that you use technology as a marketer to remind you to send out uh, communications with the customer at regular intervals. But when it comes time to those personal touches, as I mentioned, the technology is reminding you, but that can't be technology driven completely from the customer side. Specifically, not on something that is so capital capex heavy as a roofing decision, right?
I think about the fact that I have such a positive view of the salesperson that I spoke to because he was so low key, right? Because it was low pressure, because he's not constantly calling me. It's funny, before we kind of went toward the direction of the car that we're looking at now, the one we were looking at before, I just went in the website, did some research, and went to kind of email just on the website, kind of very passively, just to kind of say, hey, just looking for a little bit of information, just looking for a question, not sure if I'm in the market yet. And a couple of them, I mean, this was, I think, back in June. And a couple of them still, I mean, I'm still getting phone calls and emails. And I
Oh
told them
yeah,
specifically not to call me. I told them specifically, I don't want to, I want to. And I
but
mean,
they will.
on a weekly basis, I mean, they're calling me. So guess where I'm not going at all to get the car. Whereas this other person that we're looking at now, he hasn't called me once, but he's been so nice, so responsive when we needed him, so passive, took his time, answered my questions. I know he has, I think three, I know he has three boys. Like I know where they went to school, like we were chatting. And I literally on my desk, his card is sitting on my desk because I know if I go in that direction, like he's the one I'm calling, right? He's made that connection. And again, technology played its role in that as well because the website had a good experience. It answered my questions. It supplemented, what he was able to tell me. It drove me to the dealership, right? So it played its role, but still his touch, that human aspect and experience is what has bred loyalty in me. And I haven't even decided that's the car I want. But if it's the car I want, he's the salesperson I want, right? And that's going to influence me getting that car, right? So here on this large, multi-billion dollar, organization, here it still comes down to the person, right? This, $50,000, $60,000 decision, it still comes down to the person that I'm interacting with. It's still human. So I say all that to say, you deal with this on a huge scale. I'm dealing with this personally on a huge scale, certainly our clients on a huge scale. I know in your experience over the years, you've had the opportunity to also kind of coach and consult with even some smaller organizations, with startups, things like that. How have you found that you help to translate that when you're kind of maybe providing that insight to maybe smaller businesses in terms of what they need to do to be able to add that communication, that level of touch, that experience?
If you're a startup, right? If you're a small business, and if you're like a friend of mine and you're starting up a trades business, right? You might think in your head, "Hey, I'm a really good plumber and I could do this." Maybe you are a really good plumber, but then you started your business, and if like a plumbing company is not all about plumbing. It is about plumbing when you're in the customer's home. But if you don't have customers, then your plumbing business fails, right? So you set goals, but you have to implement marketing to achieve that. There's a British guy. He's kind of a thought leader in the marketing world. I like what he had to say. His name's Rory Sutherland, um, and I heard a quote by him. He said, the biggest misconception in marketing is that people think about marketing as a cost. It's not a cost. It's a way of avoiding an opportunity cost, right? So in order to meet those goals, you have to implement marketing to reach the customers so that you can be a great plumber. Um, and so that is what a lot of new entrepreneurs um, miss when they start their business, is that they need marketing as a way of achieving those goals, as a way of avoiding the opportunity cost of not doing business. A lot of people have the wrong orientation in their mind about that they're a good plumber, and so the customers will come and they'll be able to be a good plumber. But it in a marketplace that's really crowded with other voices, it's just really hard to do that, and really demoralizing for some people until they find that that secret sauce, right?
I think that's a great way of positioning it, because it's funny, whenever I've had to kind of ask this question, right, of, myself, again, yourself, many others in the enterprise space will often, be helpful to startups or SMBs, even if it's just friends, right? Just giving advice. And you find that you try to take this, what seems like this daunting, huge concept, which they think, you know everything because you're dealing with this multi-million-dollar company, when really you don't. You're just simply kind of boiling it down to the simplest form, right? The simplest principle, and saying, hey, this is the principle, and this principle works whether you're, $100,000 company is, selling something, or whether you're 100 million or, a $10 billion company, right? It's the same fundamental principle in terms of how you're trying to deal with people. And marketing is it's just communication, right? It's just saying, look, I have a message, I have a skill, I have a service, I have a product, and I need to find some way to communicate that to you, right? And it's funny. I think about when the internet kind of first started up, and you've probably experienced this as well, where, and it probably still happens now, where so many people would kind of put up a website and then be like, okay, the business is going to start coming, and it's just like, well, I like, how is anyone going to know your website's there? I mean, at least with a storefront, at least you got people driving by. Like, I mean, that's something. But like, with a website, like I had no business going there unless you communicate to me that you exist, and you communicate to me the reason that I should, visit your website and go there and kind of check out what it is you're offering to me, no matter how great your product is, no matter how great your skills are, just like you said. So that need to have people understand what marketing is in its purest form, right? When we boil that down to say, hey, look, this is what marketing is. This is how we communicate to people. So all that being said is kind of a question for you, Ryan. How do you get people to think about the fact that, okay, marketing is about communication, it's about education, that's beyond just an ad. It doesn't just mean that, okay, great, I'm gonna go on Google, I'm gonna get some paid search ads, or on a larger scale, I'm gonna have this huge advertising budget. Well, that's all well and good. How do you get people to understand that? Okay, now someone's clicked on the ad, like then now what? How do you communicate to them the importance of that?
As I think about it, marketing, like the success, really flows down to three things. There's the numbers, there's the statistics, right? All the numbers have to line up, right? There's the creative side, all the art has to line up. But there's a third thing in the mix, and that is magic. Or call it what you will. But sometimes the numbers all line up and the art seems amazing and it just falls flat. Sometimes the numbers don't line up and the art kind of sucks, and it's like a miracle. Um, but but that's rare, right? So you want the numbers to line up and the art to line up, because then the chances of things happening um, are, maybe you roll a four instead of a six, and that magic happens because the stats line up and the art lines up. Um, you know, there's lots of examples out there, in especially in the consumer world, where something just didn't make sense and it wasn't pretty, but magic happened. And people are running out to the stores and buying Beanie Babies, like Cabbage Patch Kids, right? So, but in any business, you want those three things to line up. You want to understand the market and the statistics behind your market, and you want your art not to suck. Um, I've seen way too many truck wraps driving down the freeway when I'm just like, pulling out my hair if I had any hair. But um, and I'm like, what? I don't even understand what your service is. Um, and so, but I find that's kind of an easy communication tool. The hard thing is making your stats understandable, making your art not suck, um, and then praying for rain. Um, and that I would say to a new person in the B2B world, the B2C world, um, d- you know, think about those three things and separate them, and that's an easy way to communicate it. And
It's funny that that magic is almost the glue that makes it kind of stick together, right? It's the thing that kind of binds it all. And that's where people really are making their decision, right? I mean, that's where they're getting caught up. The other things are almost like a means to an end, right? Is there a discernible market here, right? Is there an audience that I'm talking to? Is that audience large enough to allow me to do what I'm trying to do? Can I get enough of that audience? How do I attract that audience? All those things are so critically important. But then I've got to do something with the audience, right? Once I get them, once I get them in the store, I've got to convince them to actually hit the shelves, to get things. I got to get them to check out, right? I got to get them to actually swipe that credit card, right? It's kind of the dirty work of the process, right? But it's the place where you're actually making the money. Like the other stuff's all cute and nice, and and it's all fancy with the analytics and the great creative and the wow factor and all that kind of stuff. But it's kind of the dirty work, that's where the magic happens, right? That's what actually is driving the revenue. That's what's actually improving your return on ad spend, right? It's what's driving those metrics that really matter to make your business feasible on the small scale, but also make it profitable and drive valuation on a much larger scale, right? In terms of what you're trying to do on the enterprise level. And I think that gets lost a lot of times, right? It's just not something that marketers focus on nearly as much as they should.
somebody I personally know, a few years ago, I was asking about their personal financial plan, somebody that I could talk to about that. And that person told me that they hadn't saved, they didn't have investments, but their plan was to win Publishers Clearinghouse, win millions of dollars. And I said that would be cool, but that's not a strategy. Um, and I, I I was kind of incredulous, because how did that person think that that was a feasible plan. That's not a plan. So praying for rain, praying for the magic to happen. Going with your analogy, like the glue, I like that. Like the glue, it makes sense. Um, uh, is not a strategy. That's what you want to have happen. In the meantime, make sure your stats line up and your art lines up, and you hope for that glue, right? You have to have a strategy, be it, as you said, the things on the shelves and the checkout process has to work. Otherwise, your chances of winning the game are slim to none. So from my world in the B2B world, um, you need to have the quarterly newsletter that looks good and has good content to it. And from then you have to have the appropriate follow up to that. Um, and you have to have the appropriate customer database. All that stuff needs to line up. And then you pray for rain. You have to have that strategy, that glue. But you have to spend all your time making sure that the other stuff is right, not hoping for a publisher's clearinghouse win.
So it's funny you mentioned that, and this is a kind of a good point, right? So we have these foundational technology pieces that are just important in the modern day and age, right? That CRM, marketing automation, right? Content management, these kind of just foundational things that allow you to deliver the kind of experience that people have come to expect, that empower you to have the kind of high touch that people should have and should expect, right? So it's empowering salespeople to reach out. It's helping the marketers to communicate. It's doing all those fundamental things. As you think about this high consideration sale, right, that you deal with on the B2B side, but certainly that also insists on the B2C side, kind of taking that part of it aside, if you're talking to a high consideration product or service marketer, kind of what's the one piece of advice or maybe two pieces of advice that in your career that you have found just to be critical to that success as they're trying to drive things forward for their organization?
I would say, from my standpoint, I would first of all, I'd come back to what full circle how we started. We started by talking about the personal touch. Nothing can erase that. Your technology, your AI, whatever can serve as a means to talk to the right people at the right time. But there has to be the conversation. There is no tool that will make that unnecessary. So make sure you have that piece figured out and make sure you can do it. Number two, all this technology is driving people and raising goals. They're always going up, right? Is turning things so transactional, right? The 12 emails that you're going to get today and that I will get today asking for a quick 15 minutes to sell my widget that I want to sell, right? Nobody has time for that. And it seems like, once again, the teenage boy at the junior high dance, right? It seems desperate. Um, so uh, don't be that guy or that gal. Um, be be giving before you ask. Um, be a human, that has value to give. Then use your marketing tools, your technology to serve the that as you mentioned, the you have a great website, but who can find it, right? Use technology, your social media, your AI, your email marketing, um, your martech to make that happen. Um, but give people content, and they will remember you, especially when marketing now seems more and more like that buffet. My definition of a buffet is usually, not always, the food sucks, but you get a lot of it, right? So don't 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 suck. Like, give people stuff, and they will remember you for, as you mentioned, the car dealer that didn't harass you. but was quick to answer your needs and you retained his card, right? Be that. You're going to cut through the noise because you're not going to seem desperate. Use that technology to serve that end.
That's awesome. Ryan, thank you so much for your time today, for being on the podcast. We truly appreciate it and truly enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for having me.